Hey everybody, I'm back with another Domination Station demo. Today we're looking at the Domination Station for NASCAR. So this is really fun. I love NASCAR, one of my favorite sports to multi-enter, and that's a big part of what the Domination Station optimization tool is really all about. We want to give our members the ability to attack daily fantasy sports in every way any way or every way that you want, be it from taking cash lines, running out our top lines, to mass multi-entry GPP type competitions where we max enter tournaments. So here we go. We're going to take a look at NASCAR here real quick. So here you see NASCAR is a DraftKings sport. We click on NASCAR, and in this case I'm looking at the Go Bowling 400 from last week. So let's just click on that, take a look, and see what we've got. So initially what you see here is the player list with a bunch of different numbers. And let's go over what everything means, and then we'll get into some of the advanced stuff like dominators. Hopefully we'll have time to go through everything here. So initially you have your fighters sorted by salary. Now, the first thing I like to do is sort them by starting position, because that's really one of the most important factors in looking at NASCAR and creating lineups. We want to know where is the driver starting, so we can understand if they're gonna be a dominator or if they're going to be a differential play. So, as we look at this lineup, I've sorted it according to starting position. So you get Ryan Blaney on the pole, and so on and so forth, and you go down the list here all the way down to the scrubs at the bottom of the list. Okay, our next tab is the Dominator tab. Now, what is Dominators? What is a Dominator? Basically, the way NASCAR works, you're scoring points two ways. One, dominating the race, meaning lead laps generally, and oftentimes lead laps and fastest laps go together. The other thing is differential play, so those are drivers starting in the back and moving their way up, and each car they pass, they get a point along the way. And then, of course, you have your finishing position plays, which are situations where you don't really have much of a passing of other cars, but a car like let's say in this case, one of these guys here in the top 10 who finishes, top 5 or 4, that can put up a reasonable score. So I'm going to go through everything. We'll go back to dominators in a minute. Hopefully I have enough time to cover everything like I said. All right, so P1, P2, 10 lap. These are the two last practices. 10 lap average from the final practice. Self-explanatory. So basically we can get a look at not just the drivers, but how do they do in practice? How are their 10 lap averages? So we can see, for example, Blaney sitting on the pole, looks good. Truex crushing it in practice, looking real good. Kyle Busch looking good in practice. Kurt Busch, not so good in practice, but a high starting position. So you get a sense of potentially who to use here. You see Chase Elliott didn't look great in practice, so you might not want to use a guy starting 10th who looked like shit in practice. There we go. Now, a couple other things here. We show the Vegas odds. So here's your favorite. Kevin Harvick, I guess, was the favorite here going into the race, and so on and so forth to win. You have your fantasy points per dollar. All of these are sortable. So basically, this is your value rating. We want guys with the highest points per dollar value. In this case, Jimmy Johnson, Casey Kane, Eric Jones, Clint Boyer. These are your cash plays generally in all DFS, but certainly in NASCAR. And finally, our DFS Army projections for each player come in this column. Now, these projections or fantasy points are adjustable by the user, as are the exposures. These are set to what I actually used for this contest, but nonetheless, as are the exposures. So basically, as we're running through this, you will, let's go back to default so we can get a good look. I'm going to reset the settings here, which is a button that you can push. It brings everybody back to the original settings. And here we have the original fantasy points. So running back up, let's look at some of these different options. And I promised you I will jump back to the Dominator question momentarily. So I'm going to get to that in a second here, but let's just go some of the rest of these tabs. Your salary range, this can eliminate actual players from the pool. If you didn't want low cost or high cost players or something like that, you can remove them. Fantasy point range, same deal. I don't want anybody in my scores that are showing negative, so I might make a change there. Number of lineups, this is pretty self-explanatory. In mass multi-entry, the max is 150. Our Domination Station tool allows you to create up to 200 lineups and download them and to upload direct to DraftKings or FanDuel if it's sport for that. Finally, we have sort by fantasy points or DFS army points. So fantasy points are what you set as a user. Initially, it's the same as the quote DFS army points, but you can change these projections to your taste. And generally, you want to sort by fantasy points. In essence, this allows you to make the modifications to the projections to create the distribution of lineups that you would want and how many unique players per lineup. This is a measure of diversification. So the more uniques per lineup that we put in, the more diverse lineups we're going to have, the more actual drivers the tool is going to use. All right, so let's run it here quickly. Let's do 100 lineups using 2 unique players real quick, and then we're going to show you a pretty neat feature that no one else has, our dominators, our capacity to stack dominators. So here we go. As you see, it's running a normal optimization run. The lineups are running pretty quick here. We're at 70 already. Dale Earnhardt, Eric Jones. These are your sort of high-value plays, so it's no surprise that these names are showing up the most common in this lineup. And obviously, if we want to adjust this, we don't want as much Dale. We don't want as much Eric Jones. He actually wound up crashing in that race, I believe. But if we don't want as much of these guys, we'll adjust. The user can adjust the projection, so I'll show a little bit of that here real quick, how that's done. Let's say I don't want, I got too much Eric Jones, so I might go 52 down from 57. That will lower his projection a little bit. Very important to reset this at 100%. One of the things that I do when I'm working a distribution is I make sure I like the players to be distributed evenly throughout the set of lineups. So I try not to use the exposure setting until the very end. I really try to do most of my adjustments by modifying projections, not necessarily modifying exposures, because when you modify exposures, it will basically use a highly projected player in every single lineup for the first 50 and then not use them at all. And that's not how I like to do it. I like to mix in. I want to make sure it's got a good mix of all the different punt players and the different dominators. All right, so as you see, I lowered Eric Jones's projection from 57 down to 52. You always can see the original score right here. As it goes back down to 52, you see him showing up in only 63% of my NASCAR lineups as opposed to the original 90%. Now, we're going to get even crazier with a super cool feature that only we have. I talked about dominators earlier and how, in essence, we as the admins of the site determine who is a potential dominator in each race. So, if you look at this one here, you've got Ryan Blaney, Logano, Truex, top 3 guys. Dominators usually come from they're not differential plays, so they're going to come from the top 10 for the most part. So your top 3. Now you got Ricky Stenhouse Jr. What's he doing? He's not a dominator. Reason being, this is not a guy that's likely to lead many laps, so as much as he's starting up front, and he could be a good play, we don't consider him a dominator. Again, Kyle Busch, dominator. He's a stud, starting up in the top of the pack. Kurt Busch, not so studly. He gets a no. Danny Hamlin, not that great. Gets a no. Harvick, yes. Larson should be a yes here. Chase Elliott didn't look too good here. So we didn't look too good, so he gets a no. This is a little bit subjective, something that we set up for each race based on practices and whatnot. Who we as the admins of the site and the pros think are potential dominators for this race. Now, here's where it gets fun. Stacking options. Okay, stack at least, exactly, or at most, 1, 2, 3, or 4 players that are going to be dominators. So in NASCAR, our stack is how many dominators do we want to force the tool to put in each lineup. For this race, let's say 2. So every race is different. Every track is different. Some tracks are generally dominated by just one driver. Many tracks generally get 2 or 3, and some have no dominators, like the plate tracks rarely are dominated aggressively. So each track has a different setting. This is something we talk about in our pods, in our write-ups, in our pro player picks, all of that stuff for our VIP members. We discussed it in our Slack forum, so we know going into each race the general best setting. So we're going to add this rule of exactly 2 dominators, stack exactly 2 dominators. So what that's going to do is force the tool to use 2 of these dominators, players check yes, in every single lineup that we make. And let's see if we can pull off 100 of these. And it's rolling pretty quick, up to 55. And even though you can't fully see it, if you take a look, every lineup should have 2 dominators in it. It's hard to see that as we're running through them real quick, but that is how this should be working. And as you see, we're using a lot of Blaney, so he's your first dominator. So most lineups here are going to have Blaney and one other dominator. Looks like a lot of Truex. honestly, this would have been a just like this would have been a spectacular setup for this particular race, because I believe Truex dominated for the most part, and Blaney did amazing, and Dale Earnhardt scored huge. So this would have pretty much been a winning distribution. I would have wanted a little more Jimmy Johnson, but that's how the cookie crumbles. Take a quick look here. Kyle Busch, Truex. That's two dominators. We got Kyle Busch. We got Blaney, two dominators. We've got Logano and Harvick, two dominators. Logano, Truex, two dominators. Truex, Keselowski, two dominators. So, or Blaney, two dominators. So that is the basic strategy for NASCAR using the Domination Station Optimizer. You've got all the information right here in front of you. Coming soon, we're going to add a little bit of shading and some cool graphics to it, but at that point, it's not going to change a whole lot. And our exclusive Dominator stack, no one does that. It is the ultimate. It is born of the fact that I like to play NASCAR with multi-entry, and I need to be able to control how many Dominators I'm stacking. That's what I want to have control over when I'm doing NASCAR DFS. That's it for this one, guys. As always, hit me up in Slack with any questions, in our DFS Army Slack forums with any questions about the tool. And good luck on your next race, and let's keep on dominating.